Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. This week's episode is all about a little bit of death, a bit of misery, some happiness. Got to throw a bit of everything in the mix. Basically, this week's video is to do with Kirkdale Jail and Correction House. But what I'd like you to do first is don't forget, hit the like, hit the subscribe button most importantly, and finally, hit that notification bell, just so you don't miss any future video releases that I bring out each week. Okay, so don't forget, every Sunday, 8 o'clock, new video. So right now, to the main event. So sit back, relax, enjoy the video, and thanks very much for watching. See you in a bit, guys. So our story starts all the way back in 1818, here in Kirkdale, Liverpool. It begins with the construction of a new prison, Kirkdale Jail and House of Correction. Now, it was designed by an architect called Mr. Thomas Wright, from Salford, believe it or not. Now, his aim was to actually alleviate the overcrowding at the Borough Jail, which was in the centre of Liverpool at the time. The high prison numbers were becoming a problem, but once it was built, prisoners from Borough Jail could then be moved to here. It also had an added advantage to house those prisoners who would be due to be transported to the colonies to serve out their sentence in Western Australia. The architect had decided on a specific shape of prison, one that would allow the guards to view the prisoners at any time in their cells without alerting them to the fact that they were being watched. This was called a panopticon. The panopticon was the largest prison in the kingdom and was built to hold up to 800 prisoners with 2 large wings. Kirkdale Jail quickly became internationally famous, not only for its unique design, but also due to the judicious management and discipline that its inmates would face. A copy and precise model was actually sent to Russia at the request of the Tsar. The site itself comprised of 2 main buildings, the main one being the jail itself, and the next one being this, the Sessions House, which was situated just outside the walls of the jail. The Sessions House was the courthouse of the prison and was the final part of the prison to be built on the 5th of November 1821. But included within the design of it, the Sessions House also housed a suite of apartments which were meant to be for the magistrates and barristers. The jail quickly became a very organised prison indeed, with hospitals for both male and female prisoners and schools for the juvenile prisoners. Upon entering the prison system, the inmates would be assigned certain duties during their time there. This would be based on their gender, their age, physical ability, and their length of stay. There were 42 cells with which were set aside for the juvenile prisoners, but as there weren't that many juvenile prisoners at that particular time, the cells were actually catered for the shoemakers. So anyone who had the shoemaking skills would be placed in these cells, and then when the juveniles joined the prison system, they were allocated to the same cell so they could actually be taught the trade. In 1818, a civil engineer by the name of Sir William Cubitt designed and invented the treadmill. The treadmill, not as we know it of our day, but back then it had 3 uses. The first of all being used to grind corn, the second to actually pump fresh water throughout the prison, and thirdly as a means of punishment. Once they had the allocated quota of prisoners to use the treadmill, the rest were sent on shot drill duty. That meant transporting, by hand, cannonball shot from one end of the yard to the other, completing a 91 shot pyramid. Only then, once they completed that, would they have to then bring it back and do it all over again. For those prisoners who had committed more serious offences, such as murder, their only choice was to be sent to Kirkdale Jail to be hung. During the time since the prison opened, a total of 67 people were hung here. The hangings were a mixture of public and private hangings. Although today the ground of the original prison is now used as the Kirkdale Recreation Ground, or children's play area, whatever you want to call it, the footpaths from the prison still remain. At the northwest corner of the park, would have been situated the gallows from which the inmates would have been hung. Public executions used to draw a huge crowd, and on one occasion drew up to 100,000 people, to which only 270 police officers were able to attend. Of all the executioners around the country, there were two that tended to be very popular at the prison. First of all, William Calcraft, and the second being William Marwood, both adopting two different styles to their hanging. What follows now is a true story of one of the murders that occurred in Liverpool, where the inmates were then sent to Kirkdale Jail. Our first particular story takes us all the way back to August of 1874 here in Liverpool. Now, the incident itself involved three specific perpetrators. A little bit about them a little bit later. I just want to go through the story first, so bear with me. I'm actually reading a story from a page online called crimeandinvestigation.co.uk. And the case itself is called the Tithe Barn Street outrage. The Tithe Barn Street outrage. It's one of the main side streets, if you like, here in Liverpool. So the story goes, like I said, it was an August bank holiday in 1874. Robert Morgan and his wife Alice spent the day on a trip over to Birkenhead. And for those who don't know, Birkenhead is literally the other side of the Mersey. So they then caught the ferry back across the river, and at around 9 p.m, the couple met up with Robert's brother Samuel at the docks. The three walked up Tithe Barn Street, and on the way home, they decided to pop into a pub in Chapel Street, just for a nightcap. Now, they were only literally there for half an hour, and then afterwards, they decided to go on home. Now, not long after walking out of the pub and further up the street, they were surrounded by cornermen. One asked Robert if he had sixpence for a quarter pint. Perhaps because they were on one of the major 7 streets of Liverpool, Robert actually felt safe enough to goad them. He said they wouldn't need to beg if they had a job. But even less wisely, Robert then turned his back on them. And within a few steps, one of the cornermen delivered a punch to the back of his head, and it sent Robert sprawling across the street. Samuel retaliated, obviously, when his brother got hit, quite rightly so, and he knocked one of the assailants down. The gang then whistled for backup. 2 other assailants turned up, Campbell and Mullen, who both attacked Samuel. A third man began kicking Robert whilst he was on the ground. When he started trying to choke him, Robert's wife jumped on him. So someone took a running kick at her. She was hit in the ear so hard that she went deaf. And the kick to her head was the last thing she ever heard, as she would never again have her hearing. The noise of the fighting drew crowds out of the pubs and families from their homes. But instead of protecting Robert and his family, some encouraged the beating. One woman was heard shouting, "Give him it! Give him it!" Some men decided to join in the activity of kicking a human being like a football. Approximately 7 men kicked Robert's increasingly lifeless body for about 40 feet down the street from when the attack first happened. When Robert stopped moving, the gang fled down one of the side streets. Samuel tackled one, but then McCrave pulled out a knife, distracted, and then attacked from behind. Samuel couldn't stop the gang's escape. It was said that the police tried to intervene, but too late. Robert bled out there and then on the steps of a warehouse. Samuel returned to find an onlooker trying to revive Robert with some brandy, but it was all too late. Finally, at 10 to 10 at night, the police took control. A PC, Adam Green, arrived and escorted Robert to the North Dispensary in Vauxhall Road. The coroner found his body shockingly cut and bruised. What appeared to be a stab wound was identified on the left side of his neck. Samuel set off to capture the assailants. Now, the three men that were convicted of this particular heinous crime, and I use the word heinous quite lightly. The main perpetrator was a John McGrave, who was only 20 at the time, a Michael Mullin, who was just 17, and a Peter Campbell, who was 19. But I just, when reading this story, obviously there are a lot more gory details, which I don't really want to sort of go through on the video because it is quite disturbing. But this is the sign of the times back then. This is how the streets were around Liverpool. And Tithe Barn Street, particularly, and in that area, was apparently like a maze of streets. So not only were there gangs running prominently around the area, controlling everything, the police didn't have the numbers to intervene. And that was just one particular gang. There were several over the Liverpool Merseyside area. Now, this trial actually gripped the whole nation because of its savagery. The senseless savagery of the beating, the lack of intervention by the onlookers, the innocence and respectability of the victim, and the fact that his criminal killers seemed to be part of a new type of gang, the cornermen, all combined to keep the nation gripped to the proceedings. There were three suspects in the dock: McGrave, Mullin, and Campbell. At the trial, it was suggested that it was Campbell's sister who had encouraged the beating by shouting, "Give him it! Give him it!" The men stood emotionless in the dock. Some have suggested they didn't want to show weakness and undermine their reputations in front of everybody else. All three were convicted of murder and sentenced to be hanged. The jury, however, did recommend mercy for Campbell. He came from a respectable family, and they petitioned the Home Secretary to take account of his previous good behaviour. They also organised a petition asking for him to escape the death penalty. Campbell escaped the hangman instead, but he was sentenced to 20 years in jail. There were petitions for McGrave and Mullin to also be reprieved, but at the same time there was a petition for them to be flogged to death. In January 1875, McGrave and Mullin climbed the scaffolding at Kirkdale prison. McGrave, the alleged ringleader, is reported to have been reduced to a babbling wreck by the sight of the hangman's noose. Mullin, however, remained calm and indifferent. For both men, there was no last-minute reprieve. On a cold winter's morning, the lives of a teenager and a young man ended at the end of a rope. And in the same jail, Campbell continued his 20-year sentence. It's strange to note as well that the majority of inmates at the time would have actually been employed and earning money. So it makes me wonder if the wages were barely enough to survive on, and this then helped to drive people to commit crime. The jobs itself were quite varied, but respectable for the time. Jobs such as weaving, shoemaking, tailoring, blacksmiths, watchmaking, engineers, and plumbing, to name but a few. A lot of the main jobs were quite manual, especially for the lower paid, which was involving a lot of work at the docks. The second case for tonight involves two Liverpool sisters. So our next case is the Black Widows of Liverpool. Next case begins at 5 Skirving Street in Liverpool in 1880, where two Irish sisters, called Catherine and Margaret Thompson, lived in a property that they used as a letting house, or lodging house as it might be. Now, Catherine was the landlady of the property, and Margaret, the sister, was the char lady, or cleaner, as it's now known. Now, they'd arrived into Liverpool like so many others from Ireland, due to the harsh conditions from the potato famine. Now, in the house as well also lived other tenants, which were John Flanagan, which was Catherine's son, Thomas Higgins and his daughter Mary, Patrick Jennings and his daughter Margaret. Now, towards Christmas of 1880, John Flanagan had actually died, and to be honest, it wasn't a surprise to many people in the area, as his mother had actually informed everyone that he'd been ill for quite some time. Upon his death, his mother then claimed £70 in insurance monies, and probably would be equivalent these days to £5,000. So, as you can see, not a small amount of money. Then in 1882, Margaret, the sister, then actually married Thomas Higgins. However, a month later, Thomas's daughter Mary had passed away, leaving Margaret to claim £22 again in insurance money. Only 3 months after this, in the January of 1883, Margaret Jennings, daughter of Patrick, also died. Now at this point, the sisters then moved property to Latimer Street and then on to Ascot Street shortly after that. Now in September of 1883, Thomas Higgins becomes unwell with stomach pains. A doctor advises it's probably just a case of dysentery from drinking poor quality whiskey, so just advises him not to drink it. Anyway, 2 days after the diagnosis, Thomas died. The doctor signs the death certificate as dysentery, based on his previous visit to the place. This time, the widow is better off by £100 because of his death. Now, £100 in today's money probably would be close to £6,000, which is still a good amount of money. Now, what the sisters didn't know is that prior to his death, Thomas had actually confided in his brother Patrick to let him know that on the day the doctor visited, there was also an insurance agent. And the reason the insurance agent turned up at the property was because Catherine had actually insured Thomas for £50. And apparently this was normal procedure with a large amount of money being put against somebody's life insurance. Anyway, Patrick had become suspicious and actually alerted the insurance company to his findings, because what Patrick had actually done, with the tenacious kind of guy that he was, he'd actually gone around to a lot of the insurance companies to find that his brother had been insured with several companies to a large amount. So with him and the insurance advisor, they then alerted the police. What happened next is on the on the day of the actual funeral, a coroner's officer and 2 doctors visited the property at Ascot Street, only to find the ladies actually having a bit of a party. As there seemed to be no tears flowing and everybody in a bit of a jolly mood, this also alerted the insurance company and the doctors that something a little bit untoward was going on. So they were told that there would be a post-mortem on Thomas's body, at which point Catherine then does a runner. Margaret obviously was arrested at this point, and Catherine was later found a couple of days later, and they were both taken to jail. Now, at the hearing, other bodies were also exhumed from the people who died at the property, and it was found arsenic poisoning, not only in Thomas's body, but that of the other people that resided at that address as well. So because of this, a trial was held at St. George's Hall. The jury took up to 3 days, I believe, to actually come up with a decision, and the decision was that both the sisters were guilty of Thomas's murder. Now you're probably wondering why weren't they arrested for the other murders? Is because there was lack of evidence on the other ones. It was only because of Thomas being so recent that they were able to convict him of Thomas's murder. On the 14th of February 1884, the sisters were then taken to Kirkdale Jail, and less than a month later, on the 3rd of March 1884, both sisters were hanged. Result. I know it sounds a bit macabre to be excited about that. Not that I'm excited, I'm just happy in the fact that justice was served. And I'm sure for those poor people that resided at that property where they probably should have felt safe, the calculating and devious minds of those 2 sisters paid an end to those lives so innocently taken, all because of greed. So that's it, guys. Thanks very much for watching, but please listen to this next bit. It's really important. I hope you really enjoyed that video as much as I actually enjoyed doing the research on it this week. Labour of love, but I'm just glad it's done, and I'll just wait and see what comments I get from you guys now, whether you liked it or not. But personally, I enjoyed it. So I'm now going to have a well-earned coffee. Sorry, cheers to you all, guys. Thank you very much. And just to say, obviously, there are quite a few really good coffee places out there. Iron on fire. Anyway, without that unscrupulous, shameless plug, just want to say thank you very much to all the subscribers who've joined my channel so far. Obviously, I know the videos that I put out there are a little bit hit and miss sometimes. Sometimes I get ones like this week where it was really in depth, and others are just a short video. So as long as you're enjoying them, that's what's important to me. So until the next time, guys, take it easy, look after yourselves, and I'll see you again soon on this channel. Remember, next Sunday, 8 o'clock. And hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much. See you later.